Alright, this is lab 5 where we're using the PWM analog pins to switch the intensity of the light that's going on right here. In the code, I'm using pin 5 and I have the value set to 25%, 50%, 75%, and then 100%, as well as just the always off at the beginning with 1.5 second delays in between each change. So we'll watch the loop reset. There's 0, 25, 50, 75, and 100%. We have power going directly from pin 5 into the board, ground over here. There's a jumper going to the LED here, and then a 220 ohm resistor going back to ground. For this next part, we'll be introducing our DC motor from the Arduino Uno starter kit, where we're just running 5 volts and a 560 ohm resistor with our motor. If you look at the physical circuit here, you can see we're just pulling 5 volts and ground from the Arduino Uno into our breadboard here. We got the 560 ohm resistor in line with power and a jumper that's going to be going straight to the ground bar, which is coming from the Arduino Uno. The motor is going to be plugged in here now, and we're going to be measuring the total current at max RPM. There we go there. I got a homemade digital multimeter here set to the max of 200 milliamps. Set this up here so you can see the readings. Right, go. 17 milliamps, should be more than that. 26. There we go, 86 milliamps. 99 milliamps. 109 milliamps. 114 milliamps. 73 milliamps. 109 milliamps. 102 milliamps. These readings aren't very consistent. This is a homemade device, and I've never measured current on something like this before. It was 93 milliamps. It seems like a consistent reading. There you go, that one was 117. Seems like anywhere between like 95 to maybe 115 for milliamps on this motor. There was 98. That was 111. So yeah, it's kind of hard to judge just by using this homemade device, but I think it'd be fair to say ballpark amperage for this DC motor would be anywhere around 100 milliamps, or it'd be operating at max RPM. For this circuit, we're going to be using the DC motor, a diode, a MOSFET transistor, and the VEX potentiometer, as well as our Arduino here. So what's going on here is we're taking power and ground, going to the breadboard. Then we have power going to the motor in my hand, as well as going to the diode. And then from the diode, we have this jumper that's going into the power on the transistor. So we have power in the center, we have our drain over here on the left, and then over here we have our source. Our source is coming from the PWM pin number 9, which is our output. So when this reads over here, the potentiometer, it'll send it right back out to pin 9 of PWM. Now, for the potentiometer, we have the signal wire, which is at A0 on the analog inputs, and then for the whole thing, we just have ground and power where due. Excuse the jumpers, it's kind of hard with the not getting the right colors and all, but here we go. I'm going to turn the potentiometer. First we'll watch the motor, then I'll show the serial monitor. Getting some turns. There we go. Slow it down again. All right, now I'll show the code. So the key part here is the map, really. So what I have is the value for A0, which is originally 1023 because that's the max for the potentiometer, is then being remapped to pin 9, which is our motor, which has a max of 255 value. So when we look at the serial monitor, usually if we just have it as, you know, the motor and the potentiometer, we would go to 255 and then the motor would just be at full RPM. But since we remapped it, see, we've gone past 255 now, and I'm still not moving on the motor. So we'll slowly start cranking it up. There we go, now we're at 800, 900, almost at max RPM. There we are. Now we're at the max for the potentiometer, fully turned. And now we have max RPM on our motor. Turn it back down. And see, we stopped really at around where the motor would originally max out at 255 is where we're stopping, because it's a whole different type of scale for the motor now since we remapped it. Back to 0. For this next part, we have a very similar circuit to that before. We just actually added a push button in. So my push button is coming from power, and then I have the signal wire going into digital input pin number 7. We don't need to use analog like the potentiometer because the push button is only on and off, on and off. It's not a varying value. So the idea is I push this push button while the potentiometer value is above 500, will activate this motor. What I do have is when the potentiometer is valued above 500, the motor is activated. Serial monitor, we're in the 600s. Motor intensifies all the way up to 1,000 and go back down. We're below 500. Above 500. Last number reported is 379, well below 500. That's why the motor is off. Let's get this out of the way. I can show the code. So where I went wrong was this if statement, I think. I have if the push button is high and the value of the potentiometer is above 500, then it'll follow the instruction I had before, which is the motor being activated and serial monitor receiving the print lines. But yeah, I don't know, I'm not really sure. I was looking at this a while. I could only get the potentiometer to activate the motor there. I'm gonna turn it this way, turn it off.